Welcome to the Video Professor's Computer Learning Series on CD-ROM. This is the same great lesson that is found on our videotapes. This CD lesson window will always play on top of any application, so you can follow along step by step to learn the program. We have packed this CD with information, and sometimes move at a pace that is faster than you'll be able to follow along with. To help you with this, we have designed the CD to work just like a VCR. You can pause, rewind, or fast forward the CD to learn each part just by clicking the appropriate buttons. From the Table of Contents menu, you can select or review any part of this lesson instantly. For your convenience, a Video Professor icon has been added to your desktop. To view this or future lessons, simply put the CD in your drive and click on this icon to start that lesson. Now, to get started, simply click on the menu item you want to learn. For best results, we suggest you start at the first item and work your way through to the end. And welcome to my third lesson on Windows 95, the new graphical operating system from Microsoft. In this lesson, you will learn about the different types of data communications possible with a computer, how to install a fax modem, how to create, send, and receive a fax by computer, how to connect with another computer using HyperTerminal, how to connect with the Internet with Windows 95, and how to use the Windows 95 disk maintenance utilities. Most of this lesson is about the varieties of data communication you can do with your computer and fax modem. During this lesson, we are going to send a fax via a computer fax modem. If your system has a modem, be sure it is connected to a telephone line so you can follow along. You can follow the lesson even if you do not have a modem or a phone line connected to that modem, but of course you won't be able to send or receive any of the communications. And for those of you who have thought about installing a modem, we'll walk you through installing a new modem in this lesson. The last part of this lesson is about maintenance utilities, which everyone should use regularly to keep their computer running in top form. These utilities do not require the use of a modem. Since this is the third Windows 95 lesson, I will assume you have already watched the first two Windows 95 lessons and have a good grasp of the concepts shown in those lessons. If not, you may want to view those lessons before continuing with this one. Now, before we start the lesson, I'd like to introduce my student assistant, Suzanne. Just follow along with her and you'll be using the new data communication programs and maintenance utilities in no time at all. So, let's get started. If you haven't already turned on your computer, do so now. Remember, Windows 95 is an operating system, so it is automatically launched at startup. As you've learned in my earlier lessons, Windows 95 has many ways for users to customize their systems. So don't worry if your screen doesn't always match Suzanne's. Your system may have different program items and desktop icons available. Plus, the order of items within the program menu may not be in the same order as Suzanne's. These differences shouldn't interfere with your ability to follow this lesson. However, there's one item that we want to be sure everyone has showing: the taskbar. Viewers, if you do not see the taskbar on your screen, it should be at the bottom or might be docked at the side. You will need to unhide it for this lesson. Move your mouse to the very bottom of the desktop, and the taskbar should pop up on the screen. Right-click with the pointer in the taskbar and select Properties. Click the Auto Hide box to remove the check mark, and click OK. Now the taskbar will remain visible on your screen. With that done, let's learn how to communicate in the computer world. Data communications is a hot area these days. It can be a very technical and complicated topic when you get into it. We won't try to cover all the complex details, but there are some basic points you should understand in order to use the data communication features on your computer.
Hello?
Suzanne, did you ever make a telephone with 2 cups and a string when you were a child?
Hello?
It's a good example of a simple communication system because it has a sender, a channel, and a receiver. These 3 elements are necessary whether we're talking about face-to-face communication between people, a telephone conversation, or a computer connection. When we're talking about computer connections, the channel is often a telephone line or a network connection. The telephone line or network connection is the pipeline that carries the signal. The sender and the receiver are computers at either end of that line, sending messages of all different types through the line. The messages can be fax images, email messages, computer games or programs, document files, or voice conversations. Most of these connections can have the sender computer act as a receiver and the receiver computer act as the sender. Let's learn about the environments that control our communications. Our computers work within a digital world. The various pieces of your system's CPU process data through digital signals. These digital signals resemble a series of zeros and ones. This is called binary code. Transferring information between two computers is fairly simple when they are connected with a cable that can handle digital signals. These cables work well when you are communicating with computers within close proximity of each other like an office or building. However, to communicate with computers that are at a distance, we must rely on phone lines. This is where your modem comes in. Computers and telephone lines use vastly different signals to transfer information. Computers use digital signals, those series of zeros and ones, whereas phone lines transfer information using analog signals. An analog signal is an electronic signal that looks like a waveform with different sized peaks and valleys. In order for your computer to send a message through phone lines, it must be able to transform a digital signal into something that looks like an analog signal. The translation is done by your computer's modem. When the modem translates the digital signals to analog, it is called modulation. At the other end of the transmission, the receiving computer must be able to translate analog signals into digital signals. So it too must have a modem. When the modem translates analog to digital, the process is called demodulation. So that's why you must have a modem in between your computer and the phone line. By the way, the word modem is a combination of the words modulate and demodulate. Makes sense, doesn't it? When you shop for a modem, you'll find that they come in different speeds called baud rates. The word baud means bytes per second, which is a way of measuring the speed that messages are being pushed through the pipeline. The larger the baud rate, the faster the message is pushed through the line. Most faxes operate at least 9600 baud. And many modem connections are at 14.4, that's 14,400 baud, or even 28.8, twice as fast, and speeds are increasing even as we speak. If a message can move through the phone lines faster, then it takes less time to send. That means less time you spend waiting for the transfer and less phone charges. A modem also allows computer-to-computer connections so that you can use your home computer to act like a terminal to run programs on a large host computer far away. This is what is happening when, for example, people connect to the internet and surf the web to make connections with other computers all over the world. Suzanne, a modem may handle the signal translation, but there's one more element necessary for successful data communication connections between computers: data communication software. Imagine this. You call a telephone number and the voice that answers is speaking a different language. To effectively communicate with each other, you need to agree on a language that you can both understand. It is the same with computers talking to each other. They have to agree on a common language or protocol. Your data communication software program helps you take care of that step. It is your computer's personal switchboard operator and language translator. It makes sure your CPU is communicating with the modem. It dials the number of the receiving computer for you and helps both computers talk the same language. Sometimes this is done automatically, and sometimes you must answer some questions. As we look at the different data communications programs in Windows 95, we'll be able to see where protocol settings can be chosen to establish what is called a handshake between two computers. Don't worry about a lot of technical details. Most of the time, Windows 95 handles these choices automatically after you've set up the data communication program.
Why are most modems sold now called fax modems?
Until recently, personal computers didn't handle graphic images very well. If they did, they were incredibly slow. Once PC technology advanced enough to allow the end user to easily create and import graphic images, the business world sought means to transfer this information between computers, as well as computers and standalone fax machines. PC hardware developers answered with the computer fax modem. I'm sure you're already familiar with how a fax machine works. You simply feed a sheet of paper into it and dial the phone number for the receiving fax. When you are connected, a picture of the page is then transmitted over the phone line. A computer uses the fax modem to send files and faxes, while a fax machine can only send faxes. Because a fax machine does not have a computer to use, it is up to its modem to handle the communications language. A fax modem that is used by a computer is simply a modem that speaks the fax language. This allows your computer to talk to standalone fax machines. We already know what a modem does, so let's just look at the fax, ma'am. A fax makes a picture of a page, something like a photocopier. This picture is actually a digital signal. Once the page is turned into a digital signal, it is then turned into an analog signal by the modem using a specific fax language, so the information can be sent through the phone lines. The receiving unit of a fax page must also understand the language used by the fax, so the bits and bytes that come through the line can be reassembled into a picture at that end. Even if the image is a typed page, it's still a picture when it's faxed. It can be looked at, but without some additional translation steps, a fax cannot be edited by a word processor. Faxes are pretty well standardized these days, so you don't have to worry about the model or any special setup to connect with the receiving unit. It doesn't really matter whether you are sending to a computer or a standalone fax. Computer connections are not quite so standardized, so we do have to know something about the setup of the receiving computer in order to make a successful connection. The benefit of these setup choices is so a modem can send files through telephone lines, and at the other end, those files can work just like they did on the sending computer. A word processor file can be edited at the other end. A paintbrush file can be modified, and so on.
Professor, when using a computer fax modem, do I need to add another piece of hardware to feed paper into?
Aha! You've gotten straight to the point as usual. The computer fax is a little different because you don't need to use paper. You create your own document on screen and then send the message through the fax modem. As we'll see in a few moments, sending a fax picture is different from sending a file by modem. Data communications is an exciting way to use your computer. So let's stop talking about it and start doing it. We'll start by installing a new fax modem. As technology continues to improve existing hardware and new hardware is invented, you'll no doubt upgrade or add hardware to your present system. And when you do, Plug and Play can make installing that new hardware easier than ever before. Installing a new peripheral on your computer involves two steps. First, you must physically install the unit and make the necessary connections. Once done, you must make sure your system recognizes the new hardware so it can use it. These basic procedures must be taken when installing any new peripheral, whether it is a new printer, monitor, soundboard, optical drive, modem, or anything else that can be connected to a computer. Since this lesson deals with data communication, Suzanne and I will install a new fax modem. This is fax and modem rolled into one easy-to-use peripheral. We'll install an internally mounted fax modem. Suzanne, you'll need to turn off your system, unplug it, and take the cover off so we can see the expansion slots inside. Viewers, most of you won't be installing a new piece of hardware at this time, so just watch this section for now. You can always come back and follow the steps when you do upgrade your system. Also, if you're not comfortable opening your computer, you can take the system's unit and the new hardware that you want to add to a service center and pay someone to install it. Or you may be able to have it installed at the store where you buy the peripheral.
Professor, are all modems internally mounted?
No, they aren't. As a matter of fact, most of the earlier modems were external units. An external modem has its own cover and can sit on the desk next to the computer. It is connected by a cable to one of the COM ports on the back of the system's unit. COM port is short for communications port. Each modem or any other peripheral will come with specific instructions for installation. We can't cover all the possibilities, so we'll just cover some key points in this lesson. However, it's not a terribly complicated process. For example, an internal modem will have three kinds of connections: a mounting bracket to fasten it into the computer case, some cable or similar connectors to carry the signals inside the computer, and a slot for the telephone cord to connect. When you've identified each of those connections, follow the installation instructions that came with the peripheral to fasten it into the case and hook it up. The phone connection slot will be on the back of the card where you can reach it after the computer cover is put back on. You don't need to hook up that connection until you've put the system back together. When the installation is complete, you can plug in your computer and turn it back on. You've finished the physical connection step, and now you're ready to use Plug and Play to tell the computer about the new piece of hardware. The Plug and Play process allows the operating system to self-test and find new components. You don't usually need to answer many questions, but there's still some work to do. We've finished the plug phase of Plug and Play. Now let's look at the controls that make the modem play. Click the Start button and select Settings and Control Panel. The Control Panel has an icon for Add New Hardware and one for adding or removing programs. We need to use the hardware button for this step, so click on it. It opens a wizard which steps you through all the necessary questions. The wizard is part of the plug-and-play procedure. Click on the Next button to start the process. As this window tells us, Windows 95 can detect a new component and suggest the proper settings. The Yes button makes this choice, which is recommended, so be sure that button is marked and click Next to start the search. The warning simply advises that the detection can take a long time. Click on the Next button. While the wizard is checking the new hardware, we are given a progress report of the search. When the search process is through, click on the Next button again. We are now given a list of hardware types to choose from. We want the modem hardware type, so click on the modem title within the window. Then, click on the Next button to continue the process. The next screen gives us some helpful hints to consider before we continue. It also asks if we want Windows 95 to detect the new hardware. We do, so click on the Next button. Windows didn't recognize your fax modem as a plug-and-play device, Suzanne. Did the box that your fax modem came in have a label on it that read, Designed for Windows 95 Plug-and-Play?
No, it didn't, Professor. But why should that matter?
Windows 95 doesn't automatically recognize hardware that isn't designed for Windows 95 Plug-and-Play. Your fax modem falls into a category called Legacy Hardware. This hardware isn't specifically designed for Windows 95 Plug-and-Play. To make this hardware work with the other hardware devices within your system, we must take a few extra steps. Windows 95 walks us through these steps too. Viewers, if your new peripheral is designed for Windows 95 Plug-and-Play, then you are done. Just finish the wizard and 95 will make all the necessary changes to allow your new hardware to work with your system. Suzanne, click on the Next button so we can finish installing your new fax modem. We will manually select the proper driver files for this piece of hardware. Windows has a number of modem driver files to choose from. They now appear in this dialog box. If you were installing another hardware type, you would be given another set of drivers. Suzanne, I believe your fax modem is a 14.4 Toshiba. Use the scroll bar next to the manufacturer's window to find that manufacturer. Viewers, if you are installing a non-plug-and-play fax modem and its manufacturer isn't listed here, you can click on the Have button to install the proper drivers from the floppy disk that came with your peripheral. Suzanne, the Model 14.4 is already selected, so click on the Next button. The next screen asks which communication port our fax modem is connected to. Select the correct port for your peripheral. Once done, click on the Next button. And a final screen should appear. When it does, click on the Finish button to complete this process. With that accomplished, minimize the control menu if it isn't already minimized on the taskbar. Now that you've got your hardware installed and have a telephone line connected to the COM port, you have one more step to complete before we can use the new fax modem. We need to select a data communication software. This isn't part of the plug-and-play process, but is just as important. Data communication software makes it possible for two computers to effectively talk to each other. Windows 95 includes several data communication software options. For this lesson, we want the fax and hyper-terminal programs that come with Windows 95. Before we look at them, let's make sure the programs are installed. The fax and hyper-terminal programs should appear in the Accessories menu. Let's see if you have them, Suzanne. Click on your Start button and select Programs and Accessories. Viewers, your list will be different from Suzanne's depending on the programs that have been loaded on your system. There they are, Suzanne. The fax program allows us to send and receive faxes directly within Windows. And HyperTerminal is a new program used to easily connect to a remote computer, a bulletin board, or an online service such as America Online or Prodigy. Viewers, if you do not have the fax and hyperterminal programs available to you, you may want to pause the tape now and use the Add Programs icon in the control panel to install the fax and hyperterminal software from your Windows 95 disks. Once the Add Programs dialog box appears on screen, select the Windows Setup tab, then click on the Communications component. From there, just follow the on-screen instructions to install these programs. After installing the programs, close the control panel and rejoin the lesson. Suzanne, press your Escape key to close the Accessories menu, then click on the Microsoft Exchange icon. Microsoft Exchange is data communication software that permits you to send and receive electronic mail and fax messages.
Why must we use Microsoft Exchange to send faxes?
The fax program used in sending faxes is actually one of several information services that run within Microsoft Exchange. In reality, you send, receive, and store all messages no matter what their form within Microsoft Exchange. The wizard that appears on screen allows you to set up your own Microsoft Exchange inbox. Exchange uses this inbox to store all your incoming messages. Viewers, if your Microsoft Exchange inbox was already set up, then its window will automatically open on screen when you select the Microsoft Exchange command. If this is the case, then just sit back for a minute as Suzanne finishes setting up Microsoft Exchange so she can send faxes. Viewers may have different options in this first window depending on the communication services installed on each computer. Be sure you have a check mark next to Microsoft Fax. You can also check any other features you intend to use. However, you will be prompted to answer questions and do procedures that aren't covered in this lesson. For instance, Microsoft Mail is a datacom program that facilitates email, electronic mail operations. To set up this program, you will need to create a post office location, plus make decisions that aren't covered in this lesson. Remember, you can always come back and create profiles for one or more of these other messaging services. Once you've made your choices, click on the Next button to continue. The next window allows us to select a fax modem. If your computer is connected to a network, there might be several options here, but most likely only one will show. Suzanne, there's our new fax modem. Click on it. Viewers, if you don't find your modem on this list and you're sure it's installed in the computer, click the Add button to add it to the list. Click on the Properties button, Suzanne. Let's take a look at the settings you can choose. All these are settings for sending or receiving faxes. The Answer Mode section allows us to adjust how many rings before the fax modem picks up the call, and it also allows us to choose a manual pickup or no answer at all. If you have a separate phone line dedicated to the fax modem, then you'll probably want to use the first choice and have the program pick up after only 2 rings. However, if your fax modem is connected to the same phone line as your regular phone, then you'll want to use a manual answer or possibly the no answer option if you aren't expecting any fax calls. Remember to change this option if you do want to receive a fax. Speaker volume simply sets the loudness of the dialing and ringing tones as they play back through your computer speakers. Call preference settings are for sending a fax and gives the computer your preferences for how to dial out and how long to wait for an answer. I suggest that you leave both these options checked and accept the default setting of a 60-second wait for answer. When you selected the settings that are right for your computer, click OK to keep them and return to the Inbox window. Then click on the Next button to continue. This window confirms your choice about having the fax answer whenever the phone rings. Click Next. This window asks for your name and fax number. This sets up the identifier or station ID that prints automatically at the top of any fax you send. This is not only a courtesy, it is required by law in some countries. Suzanne, type in your name and fax number. That's the number for the phone line connected to the fax modem. Once done, click on the Next button to move to the next window. Viewers, you may see a different series of windows in this wizard, depending on the hardware and software options on your computer. Just continue through the windows and answer the questions for your system. The next screen asks where we want to locate the personal address book. This is another information service that operates within Microsoft Exchange. It stores names and numbers and addresses of those people that you send faxes, email, and files to. It is your computer's little black book. Suzanne, click on the Next button so Exchange automatically creates this service within the location designated in the dialog box. The next screen concerns personal folders. If you already have a folder that stores your personal files, you can change the path here to point to that destination. If you do not have a personal folder, click on the Next button so Exchange can create one for you. The final screen tells us we are done, so click on the Finish button. The Exchange window automatically opens on screen.
Look, Professor, I have a message already.
That message is a welcome that was generated by Windows 95 when you set up your inbox. This message has an envelope icon next to it. Normally, this indicates an email message, while a page icon designates a fax message. However, it's not quite a true email since it came with the Windows 95 package instead of by modem, but it's pretty useful information. To read your message, click once to select the message, then click the File menu and select Open, or just double-click on it. There you are, Suzanne, your first message. You can pause the tape to read this message now if you'd like, or come back to it later. When you're ready to go on, close this message window. Your inbox window should still be open on the desktop. When Suzanne set up Exchange to handle her fax modem, she also created a profile of messaging preferences. In her case, it is the default MS Exchange profile. However, we can create a list of profiles from which to choose from. This comes in handy when more than one person uses your computer. Each person can save their own preferences under a specific profile name. Everyone should have the control window minimized on the taskbar. Double-click on its button. Once the control panel is on screen, double-click on the Mail and Fax icon. When the Mail Fax screen appears, click on the Show Profiles button so we can see what profiles have been created. Suzanne has only one profile in this window, the default profile created when she set up the inbox. Before we use our fax modem, let's create another profile. Click on the Add button. Once again, we are given the Inbox Setup Wizard. Toggle off everything but the Microsoft Fax option. Once done, click on the Next button. Let's call this profile Jack and Jill. Type that in, then click on the Next button. Suzanne, click on the name of your new fax modem. Viewers, if you have a modem or fax modem installed, click on its name here. The next screen asks you if you want Microsoft Fax to answer every incoming call. Make sure the No option is toggled on so that other Datacom programs can use the line. Click on the Next button. Now type in your name and number of the phone line connected to your modem or fax modem. When you finish, click on Next. The next two screens concern your personal address book and folder. Unless you want other storage locations for those two items, click on the Next button in each screen. If you do want to change them, type in the new location, then click on the Next button. When the wizard confirms it is finished, click on the Finish button. When the wizard is done, you will have your own profile, and it will be included on the list in this last window. The buttons below the list allow you to create a new profile or to make changes to any existing profiles. For example, if you want to change the sending and receiving properties of the Jack and Jill profile, all you need to do is click on the profile name, then on the Properties button. Once the preference screen appears, make your changes. Suzanne, we are finished with the Profiles window, so close it so we can use the newly installed fax modem. Remember, Suzanne, that a fax is an image, a picture of the document, and gets sent through phone lines to a receiving fax machine. That receiving machine might be another computer with a fax modem, or it could be a dedicated fax machine. If the receiver is another computer, it must be turned on, connected to the phone line, and have the fax program running in order to receive and display or print the fax. The easiest way to send a fax or an email is to pull a name or address from your personal address book right here on your computer. You can also capture addresses from your incoming faxes and email. Suzanne, let's enter a fax number into the address book that we just created. We'll use this number to send our fax. The address book can be found under the toolbar menu and on the toolbar. The button that looks like an open book is the address book button. Click on it, Suzanne. To add a new address, click the first button from the left, the New Entry button. A dialog box opens that will step you through the process of adding a new address entry. This will be a fax entry type, so click on Fax to select it. We want this address to go into our personal address book, so make sure that entry appears in the window at the bottom of the screen. Also make sure that the radio button is toggled on. We can create additional address books to keep track of our many friends, business associates, family members, etc. For this lesson, we'll just create one. Press Enter or click on OK to move on. Type Video Professor Suzanne into the first entry box and then Tab to move to the next field. Viewers, type in the name of someone you know who has a fax machine or a fax modem in their computer. The country code identifies the country the fax is being sent to. You change this code when you are sending a fax outside of your own country. The area code is automatically filled in with your local area code. You can tab past that field too unless you want to send a long-distance fax. Type in the phone number of the receiving fax. Viewers, type in the fax number of a friend or business associate. Whomever it is, you might want to call to let them know you're testing your new fax system and ask them to call back when they receive your fax. Since this is a local call, it's not necessary to dial the area code, so leave that box unchecked. That's it. When everything is correct, click on the OK button to add the name and fax number to the address book. There's the new entry on your list. Viewers, if you've just set up your personal inbox, this should be the first address book entry. We can send a message from the address book window, but let's close it and compose the message the way it normally would be done. First, close the address book, Suzanne. In the inbox window, pull down the Compose menu and select New Fax. The New Fax Wizard will step you through the process. The first dialog box is for people using a portable computer that might be plugged into different phone lines at different times. If you're working on a desktop system, check the box at the bottom so this question doesn't appear again. Then click Next to move on. Here's the same name and number fields you saw in the address book. Since you've already put the information into your address book, let's pull the address out of it. Click on that button so we can designate who is to receive your fax. The left side of this window shows the names in your address book. Double-click on the name you entered, Suzanne, to move it to the right side box. Viewers, you do the same. You can select several names to receive the same fax.
Professor, what if I put someone on the recipient list by accident? Will I have to start over?
No, Suzanne, you simply delete the name from the recipient list. Let me show you. Double-click again on the name in the left side list. Now it appears twice on the right. We don't want to send two faxes to the same person, so click once on the duplicate name in the right side list to select it. Now press your delete key. You can also backspace out the unnecessary punctuation, but it won't hurt anything to leave it. When your recipient list is just the way you want it, click OK or press your Enter key to continue. By selecting the name, we needn't manually enter the phone number of the receiving fax. Click Next for the next window. Here's where you get to choose a cover page if you want to. The generic cover page is the default selection, but you can choose from a few other pre-made cover pages or to send no cover letter at all. We'll stick with the generic one for now. The option button lets you set a delayed sending time and other details of dialing, security, and message type. You can explore those as you need them, Suzanne. Click Next to move to the next window. The subject will appear as part of the header. You want to keep this short but informative. For this message, I suggest you type in test. When you finish, press your Tab key to move to the note area, and here you can type your message. I'm testing my new fax modem on Windows 95. Would you call me to let me know if you received this fax? Thanks. Click Next to move on. This window allows you to choose an existing file to send as a fax. Click on the Add button. Other than the occasional brief message or announcement, most of the time you'll probably be faxing documents you've created in another program, like a word processor or spreadsheet. For those types of tasks, you can select the document from this dialog box. By doing so, you are attaching the file to the fax cover letter. Normally, faxed information is not editable unless you use software that converts faxed images into text. With Windows 95, that is no longer the case. When you attach a file to a fax message, the cover letter and any fax text are still treated as a photographic image. However, the attached file is treated as a binary file transfer, a simple file transferred between two modems. This is now possible because Windows 95 supports Microsoft at Work fax capability. This allows us to send and receive files in their native format. When you fax a file, say an Excel spreadsheet, between two computers that are both running Windows 95 and MS Exchange, then the file is editable on the receiving machine. Windows 95 can detect if the receiving device is a fax machine or a PC that does not support Microsoft at Work. If this is true, then Windows automatically renders and sends a standard photographic fax image of the document along with the cover page. We are faxing a simple fax message without any attached file, so click on the Cancel button within the dialog box. Click on the Next button. When you click Finish, the fax modem will dial the number you've entered and send your fax. If your computer is not connected to a phone line right now, click Cancel. The status box confirms that we've made a connection with the receiving machine, plus other information concerning the connection and transfer of information. You've just sent your first fax with Windows 95, Suzanne. Congratulations! Now, let's take a quick tour of the fax cover page editor. Within it, we have the tools to select and modify fax cover letters. Suzanne, pull down the Exchange Tools menu and select Microsoft Fax Tools and Options. This command allows us to change our fax service options. Once the Options dialog box appears, select the Message tab if it isn't already on top. We can see that this dialog box repeats many of the choices we saw as we created our fax with the wizard. The lower part of this window lists the cover page choices with Generic highlighted. Click the Open button, Suzanne, so we can see the generic page layout. Now maximize this window so we can see more of the cover page. The cover page editor is actually a page layout and design program, sort of a combination of word processor and paint program. It allows us to manipulate text and graphics on the page. Much of the text is in the form of fields that are filled in from the data supplied when you send a fax, such as recipient name, company, fax number, etc. We set up the sender information when we created our profile in MS Exchange. It is automatically filled in for us. We could use the scroll bars to see the rest of the page, but let's look at the big picture. Pull down the File menu and select Print Preview. This is the generic fax cover page layout. Click on the Zoom In button to see a magnified view of this page. Not bad, but let's look at another cover page. Click on the Close button to close the preview. Pull down the File menu and select Open. Use the scroll bar to bring the For Your Information file into view. It should be close to the end of the list of files. When you find For Your Information, double-click on that file name. Pull down the File menu and select the Print Preview option again. Once the cover page is on screen, click on the Zoom In button. This cover page looks like it has the same sender and receiver information as the generic cover letter. It does, however, have a different header, plus the sender's address is in a footer on this one. The easiest way to build your own page is to start with one that's already created like the one you see before you, then edit it to match your needs. We won't be doing that for this lesson, but you now know where to find the various pre-made cover pages so you can make your own page. Suzanne, click on the Close button. Now pull down the File menu and select the Close command. And then click on the Cancel button to close the Fax Properties dialog box. Now that you know how to use your fax modem to send faxes, let's look at the other Windows 95 communication services that help us communicate with the cyber world. We'll start with HyperTerminal. HyperTerminal is a general communication program, and we can use it to connect our computer to another computer. It can't send a fax image, but it does allow us to transfer files between computers. As a matter of fact, this is how my script writers and I move scripts back and forth as a new Video Professor lesson is being created. The HyperTerminal program uses the modem part of the computer's fax modem. And not only do you use it to transfer files, it can also be used in connecting with computer bulletin boards and other information programs, as well as the Internet. HyperTerminal also allows us to send and receive files from a computer that isn't running Windows. Let's take a quick look at HyperTerminal, Suzanne. Open the Start menu and select Programs. Now select Accessories. And within its menu, select HyperTerminal. Before we actually use HyperTerminal, we must know the phone number of the receiving computer. You also need to set up some preferences and make sure both computers are using the same protocols. Once you know these settings, you can save them in a connection description, so future connections are as simple as the click of an icon. What we see here are some connections that have already been defined and assigned icons. Let's create a new icon for our connection, Suzanne. First, double-click on the HyperTerminal icon. This opens a connection description dialog box that will prompt us to make choices necessary to define settings. If the window opens in the background, click on its window. Suzanne and I have a new script writer on staff, so let's create a new icon that represents her system and protocol settings. First, type in script writer as the description, Suzanne. Then select an icon to represent this connection. How about the phone next to the textbook? Viewers, type in the name of a person or business that you may be transferring files with in the future. You may also enter the name and connection number of a bulletin board service. Once done, click on OK or press your Enter key. Now enter the phone number connected to the receiving computer's modem. At the bottom window, your fax modem model should be showing. If it isn't, use the drop-down list to select it. Once done, click on OK or press your Enter key to continue. This screen is ready to dial the number, but we're not quite ready yet. Click the Modify button next to the phone number, Suzanne. This shows the properties assigned to this connection. The phone number is correct, but we still need to be sure of the handshake protocols, so we will have a clean connection. Click the Configure button below the modem listing. This gets us a little deeper into the details of how the modem will handle the data that's coming and going through the phone line connection. The General tab shows the port, speaker volume, and modem speed. We'll use the default settings for now. Your most important settings are in the Connection Properties dialog box. Click the Connection tab, Suzanne. Data bits, parity, and stop bits are the communication protocols used to check and validate data that is sent or received. If these do not match between the two modems, then no connection can be established. A fairly common setting is 8 data bits, no parity, and 1 stop bit, which we see here. However, this is a question you should ask of the person whose system you are connecting with to save time and frustration. Other types of setting controls are available from the tabs and buttons in these windows. For our connection with a college professor, however, all the default settings are fine. Click OK, Suzanne. Back in the Properties window, the Settings tab gives you options for how your computer will connect to the other. and how keystrokes are to be interpreted during the session. In all of these choices, the default settings are a good place to start if you're uncertain. If a special setting is needed, chances are that the person in charge of the computer you're trying to connect with will be able to tell you what they are and how to set up your computer to make the connection. Click OK to save the property settings. And we're back to the Connect window, ready to dial. Just click on the Dial button to start the connection. Your modem will dial the number that you put in the connection properties description. You'll hear a sequence of tones as the two computers negotiate their handshake, making sure they can communicate with each other. Your screen will show the status of this process. When the connection is made, the status bar shows Connect. It also displays the speed and settings for this connection. If a person is at the other computer, you can type messages to each other. The sender won't be able to see his typing, but the receiving terminal will display the message allowing that person to reply. In most cases, you will use a hyperterminal connection just to send or receive files. The toolbar has a button for sending and one for receiving. It also has buttons to connect and disconnect. When you have finished your business, you need to sign off and then disconnect the phone. To disconnect, simply click on the toolbar button that shows the little telephone being hung up. Your status bar shows when the connection is closed. Close the hyperterminal window, Suzanne. The closing dialog box prompts you to save the session. Click Yes to save the property settings and add this icon to your hyperterminal window. Next time, you'll only need to double-click the icon to dial up the connection. You can also drag this icon onto the desktop for quick accessibility. Click the X to close the hyperterminal window, Suzanne. Viewers, the next section is more of an information overview than an actual hands-on lesson. So sit back for a few minutes while we look at a few more ways to communicate with Windows 95. Not everyone has the luxury of having a separate phone line dedicated just to their computer. For those of you who only have one line, you can still use your phone without reconnecting the service line each time you want to make a call. The procedure is fairly simple. Just loop your telephone line through the modem before it connects to the phone itself. The outside line should plug into the slot marked line, and the phone should plug into the slot marked phone. Of course, the modem must be plugged in and turned on. From here, there is a little Windows feature you can use as an auto dialer. It is called the phone dialer. This is not a computer-to-computer connection. It simply uses your computer like a big phone book to keep track of numbers and to automatically dial a number for you when you want to make a call. Let's take a quick look at it. First, you open the Start menu and select Programs. From there, select Accessories and Phone Dialer. The dialer window has a keypad just like your phone, plus a speed dial list where you can store the numbers you use frequently. To dial a number, just click the buttons or type them from the keyboard. When you have the number, click the dial button to make your call. After you hear the modem dial the number, pick up your handset and talk into the phone as usual. When the call is complete, click Hang Up to disconnect. Pretty simple. Besides your speed dial numbers, the dialer will remember the numbers you key in. You can simply click on a number from the list to dial it again. When you finish your phone call, close the dialer window. Suzanne, with your computer, a modem, and a telephone line, you can tap into a worldwide network of computer resources. We've seen how the fax program works to send and receive documents. You also saw an email message in your inbox even though it didn't really come over your phone line. These are only the tip of the data communications iceberg. To send and receive electronic mail with your computer, you need to link your computer with other computers. For a fax message, you made this connection simply by dialing the number of the other computer or fax machine. For email, you can also dial the number of another computer, but the computer must be set up to receive email messages. Companies called service providers offer email and many other network connection services that can link you to the Internet. You've probably heard of Prodigy, America Online, CompuServe, or Genie. These service providers have telephone access points all over the country. There are thousands of locally based service providers who offer connection to the Internet. I suggest that you look at my 2 lessons, Learning to Use the Internet and Mastering the Internet, to find out about all the possibilities waiting for you on the information superhighway. Microsoft Network, which is packaged with Windows 95, is one of many options that will help you make a connection with the Internet. MSN provides the same basic service as America Online, Prodigy, and CompuServe. Many of you will already have a MSN Microsoft Network icon on your desktop. If so, all you need to do is double-click on that icon to take a look at the new service. The first screen gives us a little more information about MSN and how you can sign up. As it says, MSN will give you access to the Internet, email service, bulletin boards, plus news and access to other sources of information. Suzanne, click on the OK button. From here, you just follow the directions on each screen. Like the other commercial service providers, Microsoft Network will walk you through all the necessary steps to set up an account. You'll be asked for the number of the phone line connected to your computer plus information concerning your name and address. You are also asked how you want to pay for MSN. Remember, MSN is a service similar to Prodigy, America Online, and CompuServe, so you will be billed for using it. It also has an on-screen agreement. You don't have to do anything if you don't want. But Microsoft does give you a chance to take a test drive on its service. If at any time you don't want to explore this service, just cancel out of any MSN windows that appear on your screen. Before we end this review of communication services, let's look at one more important new program in Windows 95. Dial-up networking, located within the Accessories menu, is very similar to HyperTerminal. It too is used in connecting your computer to another. However, there is one very important difference. Not only can you send and receive files through this connection, you can also access any shared resources on the other computer, such as a project folder and its files. This is a great way to connect to your work computer from home or when you're on the road, to check messages or transfer files. To make this connection possible, both computers must have a modem installed plus Windows 95's Network Neighborhood. Well, that's the end of our review. We didn't cover everything, but you now have the basics so you can make some decisions on how you can use your computer to communicate with the outside world. Suzanne, you've seen several different communication tools today. For the rest of this lesson, I want to show you some basic maintenance that should be done regularly on your computer to keep it running smoothly. Before we start looking at these utility programs, click the X button to close any remaining open files on your desktop. And if you have any open files on your taskbar, right button click on them and select Close. Now, Suzanne, we're ready to take a look at the system tools built in Windows 95. All these tools will help you manage your data and avoid or recover from disk errors. When you use these computer tools for routine maintenance on your computer, you can usually prevent more serious problems such as total loss of files. The tools are all connected in one place, so they're easy to find. Click your Start button and select Programs and Accessories and System Tools. The tools listed may vary according to which accessories you have loaded, but everyone should have Disk Defragmenter and ScanDisk. Both these utilities were available under the older DOS operating system, but now they take full advantage of the Windows interface. Viewers, if you do not find one of these utilities on your list, you can still watch the tape to decide if the utility will be useful to you. You can add these programs by using the Add Remove Programs icon in the control panel, just as you did for the Datacom programs. Select ScanDisk, Suzanne. This is a useful tool for checking and repairing data errors on any magnetic disk, but especially on your hard drive. As you open and close various files while using your computer, and especially as you are working with several files at once, problems can develop with lost clusters or invalid files. Depending on how heavily you use your computer, a monthly or more frequent ScanDisk can detect and correct such errors before they become major problems. It's a simple procedure, Suzanne. The top of the dialog box allows you to click on the disk you want to check. Our C drive is automatically selected. If you want to check multiple drives in a single session, hold the Shift key to click on additional drives from the list.
Professor, why isn't my CD-ROM listed here?
Good question, Suzanne. ScanDisk works only on magnetic disks, floppies, and the hard drive, but not on a CD-ROM or network drives. The second section gives the choice of a standard or a thorough test and gives you a brief description of each.
The description is helpful, but I'm not sure I understand the part about disk surface.
Another good question, Suzanne. It's important to know what you're doing to your computer when you use a system tool. Move your mouse pointer over the Thorough option and click the right button. See the What's This button? Left-click there for more details about the procedure. The Thorough option looks at the files and folders to be sure they're intact and error-free, and also physically checks the drive for bad sectors and other problems that would interfere with safe storage of your files. Of course, it depends on how important your data is, but you can save some time by using the standard scan most of the time and a thorough every 3 or 4 months. Click outside the box to close the information box. The checked box below the Type of Test section allows you to have a ScanDisk automatically fix any errors it finds. If you leave this option unchecked, ScanDisk will prompt you each time an error is detected and ask you to specify how you want it to be repaired. Let's review the settings for automatic repairs by clicking the Advanced button, Suzanne. For example, look at the cross-linked files section in the lower left corner. The automatic setting is to make copies, which simply creates another copy of a file that has become linked to other files. Thus, no essential parts are lost. Click Cancel to close the Advanced Options dialog box, Suzanne. My suggestion is to check the Automatic Fix option, unless you know of special conditions on your system that you need to respond to individually. When you have the settings you want, the Start button will begin the scan. The actual process will take some time depending on your hard drive's condition. The status box will update the progress as the program does its work. When it is finished, click on the Close button so we can move on to the next utility, Disk Defragmenter. When you first create a file on a brand new empty disk, it gets stored pretty much all in a continuous space on the disk. But as you open and close the file and make changes, it will get broken up into smaller and smaller pieces, fragmented, and stored in different places. After a while, you have lots of files scattered all over the disk. Your disk drive then has to work harder to retrieve these files into memory whenever you want to work with them. Your system will begin to slow down because it's spending more and more time looking for all the file fragments all over the place. The Disk Defragmenter searches through all the files and reorganizes them so they're in fewer pieces and closer together. It might even be able to put the whole file back into a continuous space.
Professor, what's the difference between ScanDisk and Defragmenter? Sounds like they both are working with files.
They do both work with files. ScanDisk looks at the disk itself, the physical storage medium, and the way whole files are saved. Defragmenter looks at the pieces of individual files in order to pull them back together. You should run the ScanDisk first and then the Defragmenter. We've used ScanDisk already, so let's look a little closer at the Defragmenter program. Open the Start menu and select Programs. Now select System Tools under Accessories. And within that sub-menu, select Disk Defragmenter. This is a simple choice, isn't it, Suzanne? All you need to do is select the hard drive to be defragmented. Suzanne, use the pull-down menu to select your D drive, then click on OK or press Enter. The first step in the process is to check the current status of the disk. Defragmenter says your D drive is 6% fragmented, and you don't need to defragment at this time. Of course, you can do it anyway if you'd like. Viewers, your message will be different from Suzanne's depending on the state of your own disk. If the disk does need to be defragmented, the Start button will begin the process. Suzanne, click on the Select button so we can check your other drive. Drive C is already selected for us, so click on the OK button. The status box indicates that Drive C is only 1% fragmented. No need to do anything now, so click on the Exit button to close this program. Defragmentation can take quite a long time on a badly fragmented disk. During the process, you do have an option to stop it if you need to use the computer for other work. Defragmentation can then be resumed later when you have more time available. Well, Suzanne, we've covered a lot of material in this lesson. Now, not only do you know how to send and receive faxes and files, you can use Windows 95 utilities to improve your system's performance. You also have a good overview of the other communication programs offered in Windows 95. Thanks for being such a good student. And remember, there is more you can learn from me, the Video Professor.